If you can place the music and the face, you must have been around 20 years ago when the Dr. Max Show first debuted. If not, this face will probably be more familiar. 20 years ago today, on January 23rd, 1961, the Dr. Max Show first aired. Since then, thousands of children and parents have shared a part of their weekday afternoons with Dr. Max and his friends. Many parents who watched the show with their children in the early 60s have grandchildren who watch the show now. In early January of 1961, Cowboy Marshall J announced his upcoming departure for San Francisco, a larger television market where he would continue to host his children's show. This left WMT-TV with a captive afternoon audience, but no host for its weekday children's show. Max Hahn's experiences in entertainment originated in the 30s with his work in radio theater at KWCR Radio, the forerunner of WMT Radio. He had also played over 70 roles in community theater and Old Barn Players theater productions. Even with this performing experience, Max Hahn was surprised to receive a phone call one morning from WMT's general manager, Doug Grant, asking him to consider hosting a daily children's show. Max Hahn had been working for 30 years as a printer at local firms and was working nights at the time of the call. His schedule would allow him to work nights, sleep in the mornings, and arrive at WMT in time to prepare the afternoon show. Max didn't have to ponder long before deciding to accept the offer. The first order of business was to establish an identity, a character for this new host.
I got out there and they decided, okay, I could take over the show, for a tryout and everything. But they didn't know what to call me. They didn't want any ship's captains and cowboys and so forth. And so we had several meetings on that. Every time I go out, we have meetings. It was going to be the Max Hahn Show, the Max Show. It was going to be a cartoon show. What are we going to call it? So I went out there at a meeting one time, and one of the boys come down the hall toward me then, and he says, we got it. We got to settle. You're Dr. Max. And gee, that sounded awful. Dr. Max? What was that? I thought that was a terrible name for a show. But I guess it caught on.
Decked in a safari jacket and hat and lugging a steamer trunk covered with stickers from countries all over the world, Dr. Max, the world traveler, arrived, ready to bring young viewers an hour and a half of fun every weekday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Surrounded by relics such as a tom-tom, swords, a bear rug, and globe, Dr. Max mixed stories and features such as the Three Stooges with cartoons. Cartoon characters such as Mr. Magoo, Woody Woodpecker, Popeye, and Yogi Bear with Boo Boo became special friends. But Dr. Max's best friend evolved in a rather unusual way.
On the set, during the show, somebody dropped something, made a noise, and went over the air, of course. And, see, I ad-libbed most of the show, and I said something about, oh, Mambo, what's Mambo doing now? I just created this name up, and blamed it on an unseen character. And from then on, little thing happened, if I'd make a mistake or supposed to have read something wrong or something else happened, I'd blame it on the non-existent Mambo. And finally, I had a crew member, a camera member, hand me something that I asked for, and all I could see was the arm or the hand, ask me something. And that was supposed to be my helper and so forth. And after that, finally, they got letters about the kids. They wanted to see who Mambo was, what they wanted to see him. And so I was talking to Fred Petrick, who plays Mambo, had been a friend of mine for years. We used to be in dramatics together in the community theater. And he used to do clown things for different occasions, as a hobby. So we got talking one day, and I asked him how he'd like to be a clown, or do you want to take the trouble to do all that makeup and everything? And he said, yeah, he'd like doing that. So brought him on one day. Well, the first time, a few times he was on, so he couldn't talk. He just, was there and did stuff for me. Then the kids were there, they wanted to hear him talk. Mambo had to say something, be something, or they wasn't going to watch the show anymore. So I said, Mambo, you got to talk, or we don't got no show. And so we started talking, and that's how it evolved. From there on, we went to other things.
Like Max, Fred Petrick, who portrays Mambo, had been involved in entertainment for years. He had worked in community theater with Max, and the two teamed up to form a comedy team called Murgatroyd and McGillicuddy. Mambo, loved for his bumbling kind-heartedness, was also admired for his exacting magic.
I'd always been interested in magic. I can remember when I was 5 years old, I tried to do magic and had no idea of how to do it. So I've always been interested in magic. As I grew up, I finally hired a man to come over and teach me the basics of it. And from there, I developed a lot faster because I realized there were catalogs and magic shops and so on. So I went into magic on my own because it gave me a chance to do something and not really depend on someone else. Most of my magic at that time was done with church groups or with Cub Scouts or with children's groups of some kind. So I got to thinking after a bit that I needed something a little bit better, more of a push. And I thought, well, hey, I'll try clowning because that will add to the magic. So I went into clowning. Then when Dr. Max called and wanted Mambo to appear, I suggested the clowning. And the director at that time was a bit dubious because he was afraid it would satisfy the younger children and the older children wouldn't care too much for a clown. But some way it seemed to have clicked, and so they did keep Mambo, although Mambo was only supposed to have been on once or twice, you know, just enough to satisfy the youngsters' curiosity. And however, luck has it that he's been on now with Dr. Max for quite a while.
In the early 60s, nearly every television station had a locally produced children's show, hosted by a flamboyant cowboy, a space hero, or a ship captain. The Dr. Max Show aired opposite KCRG's Sheriff Steve with Sourdough Sam and KWWL's Captain Jet. Yet in 1963 and 1964, Dr. Max's ratings exceeded those of the other two combined. As the popularity of Dr. Max and his show grew, so did that of his buddy Mambo. Soon, Sunday mornings found Mambo with his own show.
It must have been in the late 60s or early 70s. They decided to give Mambo a spin-off show of his own for a while. The theme of that show was a circus motif. They had a big canvas in the background as the tent, and I started the show by crawling in under the tent and onto the set. The program was somewhat similar to the Dr. Max Show in that we did have cartoons, but we also incorporated music and a lot of pantomime. And I would pantomime different sequences, either the words to the music or something else. And it was geared chiefly to youngsters under five or less.
Dr. Max and Mambo became personalities in their own right, and their presence at fairs, store openings, and parties was in great demand. Dr. Max spent Saturday mornings with area young people as he led Story Hour at the library. Dr. Max and Mambo had made friends of all ages, and this was only the beginning. Over the years, the cast of cartoon characters changed a bit. An English-made film series, The Tales of the Riverbank, featured Hammy the Hamster and Roderick the Rat, riding down the river in pint-sized boats and scurrying on the banks in daily adventures. Between these escapades, Hammy resided with Dr. Max in a small set of his own, complete with a fenced-in yard and a TV antenna on his house. Davy and Goliath presented a moral message, and the Mickey Mouse Club combined cartoons with songs and tales of Spin and Marty. Corky and his dog, White Shadow, were all favorites among viewers. Other favorites included Superman, Magilla Gorilla, Quick Draw McGraw with his friend Babaloo, and Deputy Dog with his sidekick Muskie. Huckleberry Hound was accompanied by Hokey Wolf and Ding-a-ling. Spanky and his gang from the Little Rascal series provided old-fashioned fun. An hour-long morning version of the Dr. Max Show also aired in the early 60s. It was geared to young viewers 5 and under. Captain Clift from the Police Department and Bill Moon from the Humane Society became regular guests. It was not unusual for Dr. Max to entertain elephants, hippos, or camels. He even shared 3 of his own pets with his audience. Bonnie Lassie, his Cocker Spaniel, Susie, his rhesus monkey, and Joe, his Mynah bird, joined him from time to time. Joe, a real favorite, could talk. His favorite phrase was, "Watch Channel 2, watch Channel 2." Although Dr. Max was honored with various awards, he discovered one sure sign that he was becoming a celebrity.
Yes, you become a celebrity when you have cows and dogs and lambs named Max. And frogs. Kids wrote in, they named their frogs. They had 2 frogs, and they called one Max and one Mambo. So you see, you're famous then when the kids start naming animals after you.
In Dr. Max's absence, Paul Eels acted as the show host. Paul was a WMT sportscaster and played the role of Uncle Paul. Every week, the What Do You Want to Be series introduced someone from a variety of professions to help young people answer the ever-popular question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Few families were without at least one important book. 8 editions of the important book were published, each new one having more pages for favorite friends, birds, pictures, presents, riddles, and magic tricks than the year before. The final page would include a list of Dr. Max rules, such as be neat and tidy, clean your plate, and say your prayers. At times, Dr. Max and his young friends seemed to speak a language of their own. Daily, children could be heard answering their friends, family, and television with Wawatusi.
The kids nowadays won't remember Wawatusi because I was using that before a lot of them were born. But Wawatusi was my way of signing off. You know, I sign off nowadays by saying, take it easy, play it safe, and be careful. When I said goodbye on the early years of the show, I would say, Wawatusi, you know, and which was supposed to be taken as goodbye, or see you later, or, you know, or even hello, you know, something like aloha, Wawatusi. But I later found out there is a town in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin. It's called Watosi, or Wawatosi, or Watosi, something like that. A lot of people from up there want to know if I was saying that, you know, about their town. But I didn't know that town existed. But that was it, Wawatusi. You'd hear different people around the streets. I know here in Cedar Rapids, a lot of times I'd hear people talking to each other. They didn't know I was there. They'd say, "We'll see you later." They'd say, "Yeah, okay, Wawatusi," you know. That word kind of caught on with a lot of people. They use that as between them. But now it's take it easy, play it safe, and be careful.
Occasionally, big-name television stars dropped in on Dr. Max. Gunsmoke favorites such as Festus and Doc came calling, so Festus could assure Dr. Max his beard was real. Mr. French, Buffy, and Jody paid a visit, and Sky King flew in for a day. Viewers learned the correct way to grasp and pass a football from Johnny Unitas. Dr. Max eagerly welcomed former Cedar Rapidian Don DeFore of Hazel fame, an old friend from his community theater days. Every day of the Dr. Max show offered someone or something new and kept the viewers coming back. Live commercials were the standard in the 60s before a ruling preventing a children's show host from endorsing products was passed.
Oh, yeah, when I first started, you know, commercials were live, every one of them. And at that time, they were 60 seconds long. They were 1-minute commercials. You very rarely saw a 30-second one, which now they almost all are. But, and being alive, it was hard, especially if you had a product, for instance, that you had every day of the week. And sometimes we'd have them on for 6 months or a year, the same sponsor, you know. For instance, we had one, and I'll say the name because I don't think it's a product anymore, a Peter Pan bread, they call it. And they were on every day. So every day I'd have to give a 1-minute commercial on Peter Pan bread. Well, after a while you run out of ideas. What do you say about it? So you find yourself getting in a rut saying almost the same thing every day about the same product. And it's hard to do. And that detailed a lot of thinking. We'd think up ideas about how to present the product, or little gimmicks, or little, we finally got the idea of cutting sandwiches. That was a bright idea. We'd make sandwiches and show how beautiful they were if they were made of Peter. But it was fun.
Many advertisers shared in sponsorship of contests. Kellogg's Yogi Bear Jelly Bean Contest drew over 21,000 entries. James McLennan from Greene correctly guessed the number of jelly beans in the jar, 439. His name was also drawn in the national competition, and James won a trip to Scotland to deliver a bear donated by the sponsor to a Scotland zoo. Viewer response to other contests was equally overwhelming. A Mickey Mouse coloring contest yielded nearly 25,000 entries. Youngsters watching the day-to-day antics of Dr. Max and Mambo enjoyed the calamities, too.
One thing in particular I remember, I used to have a bookcase on the show. It was a tall one. It was made in our maintenance department. It was a tall bookcase with several shelves, and we'd use that to put books and things that we'd receive from Cub Scouts or whatever, or gifts or papers or anything on the shelves. And one day I was on an appearance, and Mambo wasn't with me at the time, and he did the show for me. A lot of times if I'd go away individually, he'd do the show. And when I was at the appearance, some of the kids come up to me and said, well, has Mambo been fine on the show since I've been gone? Has he been doing all right? Has he been a good boy? He said, he did something. You know what he did yesterday? And I saw one of the other kids kind of nudge the kid, don't tell it. And I said, what did he do yesterday? What happened? He said, he knocked over your bookcase. I said, what? Mambo knocked over my bookcase? What, on the show? He said, yeah, but it was an accident, Dr. Max. He couldn't help it. We don't want you to scold him or hurt him or anything, but he couldn't help it. And I said, he knocked over my book. But that happened on the air. And Mambo did accidentally, it happened. He was reaching for something on the top shelf, and the bookcase was not set too squarely, and I think it had fell over.
Mambo always had good intentions, but managed to botch things up, to Dr. Max's dismay. What often appeared spontaneous to children had been well thought out before the show. The show was done live all 20 years, so retakes on a trick were impossible.
We seldom do camera tricks, honestly, but there have been just a couple where we've taken advantage of the camera. In this particular instance, we had a lawnmower there. Dr. Max, I think this was in black and white, if I'm not mistaken, when we still had black and white pictures rather than the color. And our carpet was really two carpets that were butted together, you know, to make the floor covering. And we had this lawnmower there, and we got to thinking, how can we use this, you know, in some way? And someone came up with the idea, I'd cut through the carpet. So we started the lawnmower off stage, or off camera, and Max saw me coming and was yelling at me, don't bring that in here, Mambo, don't bring that in here. And the next picture would show me coming in, pushing the lawnmower. Well, then I went on through the picture and out the other side. Then we killed the camera for just a moment and separated the carpet that had been butted together so it would look as though there was a swath cut by the lawnmower. And then after I was off camera, the camera took a picture of the carpet seemingly cut in two. And Dr. Max was, of course, quite upset about that. But that's one of the very few camera tricks we've used on the set.
In more recent years, a few new faces have been added to the Dr. Max show. Paulette Myers, along with her puppet friends, Sammy, Betty, Rags, and others, have delighted people of all ages. Captain Gardner from the police department, Mary Jane Wilkie from the Humane Society, and Barb Perkinson from the Indian Creek Nature Center combine information with fun. Gail Hartwig musically enlivens the show. Current cartoon regulars are the ever-funny Bugs Bunny, Popeye, Sylvester and Tweety, Porky and Daffy,
What are you doing?
and Foghorn Leghorn. After 20 years of cartoons, Dr. Max has a definite favorite.
I love Foghorn Leghorn. I like Foghorn Leghorn about as much as I think almost all the kids like Bugs Bunny. But Foghorn Leghorn is a character, and he assumes that all the time, the same character. Like a blustering senator, maybe, you know. Like, and Foghorn Leghorn always saying, no, pick that up. I say, pick that up. No, I say, pick that up. You know, he repeats himself, but he's always maintains the same character. And the problem, he always does things, but he's always on top of everything, and he's the boss, tells him how to do it and how to do this and how to do that, and generally always ends up on the bottom rung of the ladder.
For the last couple of years, Mambo and Dr. Max have left the studio on occasion and discovered new friends and amusement all over eastern Iowa. Whether exploring brewmaking, a new museum, the kitchen, or their own backyard, there's always something to bring a smile. In an ever-changing medium, one in which many shows fail to last 2 seasons, the Dr. Max Show has survived 2 decades. But in 20 years, have children changed? One expert doesn't think so.
I don't really think the kiddies have changed too much over the last 20 years because they're all a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And while TV has broadened their scope of knowledge, I still think they're just as curious, they're just as wondering about how things are done, they're just as anxious to learn as they were then.
Today, another decade of smiles with Dr. Max and Mambo begins.
You take it easy, play it safe, and be careful. See ya. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.